Welcome to the High Rise Podcast, presented by Headset, the leading data and analytics company for the cannabis industry.
Welcome back to the High Rise, a laid-back, data-back podcast where we talk all things cannabis from U.S. MSOs and single-state operators, actually, Canadian LPs, products and market analysis through the lens of data. My name is Cy Scott with Headset, and I'm joined as always by Emily Paxia of Poseidon.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the High Rise.
And today we're going to talk all about Sunburn Cannabis, the latest and greatest coming out of Florida. And to help facilitate that conversation, we got two very special guests today. Danny Moses, Chairman, and Brady Cobb, Founder, CEO of Sunburn. Welcome, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. Happy to be here.
Yeah, we're really excited. Obviously, Brady, you've been on the show a number of times, and I think, we're going to have to get you that 5-timer jacket pretty soon here. But why don't we start with introductions and a little bit about your background for those that maybe haven't heard those previous episodes. And then, you as well, Danny, I think your background is quite interesting and, the story of how you came into this cannabis category. So why don't we start with that?
Yeah, sounds good. Brady Cobb, lifelong cannabis user, far longer than my mom would probably want to hear. Big fan of the space, attorney by background. As people know, cannabis is largely in my blood. My father was a huge smuggler, late 70s, early 80s in Florida. The name Sunburn that you just mentioned comes from the fact that the DEA task force that was impaneled to arrest, indict, and convict him and put him in prison was called Operation Sunburn. So we, at the opportune time, after I've gone through what feels like 150 years winding my way through the cannabis space to where I could launch my own company, it was with a lot of pride that we named it Sunburn Cannabis, as a little tip of the hat to all the OGs, as well as everybody that's ever taken the chance to support the plant and suffer the consequences. It's our little tip of the hat to the DEA too. So we built and sold a previous business called One Plant, built in Florida. We were kind of a big disruptor in Florida, brought really premium California, West Coast style cannabis experience to Florida, very much culturally on brand with the industry when most of Florida is incredibly medicinal. We sold that to Cresco Labs last April, and then ultimately pivoted and took our time to find the right deal to re-enter the space. And very happy to have Emily and Poseidon, as well as a great slew of investors behind us. So, I've known Danny here for quite some time. We actually were on opposite sides of the deal when I was potentially looking at going into Michigan. Realized it didn't work, but stayed in touch and couldn't be more thrilled to have, the Big Short as my big long, as my chairman. And, I won't toot his horn too much, but, to raise the capital that we just raised in the current environment and to do it with him behind us has just been nothing short of a miracle. Wouldn't have happened without him. It's been quite the ride. I'll let him introduce himself. He really needs no introduction, but incredibly excited to get to work. And more importantly, incredibly excited to be back, I think, for my third or fourth time with you guys on the podcast. I'm a big fan.
Yeah, thanks for that, Brady. So Danny Moses, I've been in cannabis for about 5 years now. Prior to that, I kind of started my career in 1991 as a municipal bond analyst. So going from that all the way to this was quite a journey. Was a institutional equity sales at Oppenheimer in the late 90s. That's where I met Steve Eisman and Vincent Daniel. I later joined them at their hedge fund, Front Point Partners. Obviously, you read about that part in the Big Short. I won't go into that. And ran a hedge fund after that iteration at Front Point with both Porter Collins and Vincent Daniel, who, by the way, are both investors in Sunburn, I might add. We kind of shut things down late 16, early 2017 when we realized that long-short financial services, there wasn't a lot of money to be made when the Federal Reserve was manipulating the yield curve continuously. So after all that, I found my way into various industries, and one of the industries I particularly took to was cannabis. Not necessarily as a user, but as an investor. And when I first entered the space, and you guys are the OGs, I defer to all you guys, Emily, Brady, the rest of you guys that have been doing it for years, I'm sure you would appreciate when I came in, there's a lot of C&D players in the space. Negative selection almost. People that either didn't make it in a different part of other businesses or whatever, or people that wanted to go out on their own and venture into this. And I realized that there were some great investment opportunities, but it wasn't ready yet, in my opinion. So I dove in a little bit, made some investments here and there. And the best part of all of this, as Brady just mentioned, was meeting him kind of 2018, 2019 on a deal that we were trying to do together. I was kind of with the selling group. He was with the buying group. We kind of looked at each other and realized the timing wasn't right. We should both walk away and something good's going to come to us in the future. I kept in touch with Brady, watched him build One Plant Bluma, sell that to Cresco Labs miraculously for over $200 million in one of the worst tapes, probably even worse than this has been for the sector. And I begged him and pleaded that if he ever gets any other opportunities that I can be involved in, to please call me. Well, he got a lot of calls from a lot of people after he closed a deal with Cresco. And we kept in touch on a daily basis. And when I found out what he was looking to do here, I said, listen, I'll come in any capacity that you want me. So I'm really along for the ride here. I couldn't be more thrilled. Probably the most exciting thing I've ever undertaken in my professional career. And from a personal career perspective as well, I think this will be very fulfilling to watch the sector, which you guys have built, to watch the macro grow along with this micro here on what I think is going to be a tremendous single state trade, which I know you're going to get into here. So I'm thrilled to be here and happy to answer any other questions that you have. So.
Love it. It's always great when smart people come into this space. Just makes it better, right? And we've seen a lot over the years, and it just continues to improve. So excited to have you here. Excited to see what you guys are going to do with Sunburn. Let's talk about Florida. Like, coming back to Florida, obviously a lot of experience there, second nature, but you could have chosen any market to jump into, right? So let's just start. Like, why go back to Florida? What's the play there? What's the big opportunity? What do you think that is left to do after you did it before?
What we saw in Florida when we launched One Plant was a very immature medical market, lots of stores, a few multi-state operators doing business. Trulieve largely had a stranglehold on the market share, and it was incredibly average product that could not compete with the black market. So it was, 400,000 patients plus or minus when we entered the last time, and ultimately, of those, it's 400,000 against 21 million residents. So it was a smaller percentage of the overall. So that means there was a lot of people that didn't want to get cards because either A, they didn't understand it, or B, the quality wasn't there. They got better cannabis buying on the black market and paying via Venmo. So my entire mission to the team was go build and let's go bring in genetics, bring in a West Coast cultivation team, mix it with some Florida cultivation guys that I've known for a long time, bring proper genetics in, and go attack that premium market. Let's attack the illicit market in a way that's our true competitor. My competitor wasn't Curaleaf or Trulieve. My competitor was the guy who was getting packs in from California on the black market. And ultimately, when we did that and we put hand trim flower and we were disciplined, we had great success. And then we sold, we exited, and we sat back and studied. We're huge data geeks. That's why I'm a big fan of this podcast. And we studied the data, and we saw there wasn't really anybody servicing that top end of the market. Recently, Jungle Boys entered California. They saw what we did at One Plant and said, all right, we're going to Florida. Cookies, same thing. And what we saw is when Cresco kind of migrated our business away from where we had it, moved it more towards the middle or lower tiers to kind of go on a volume basis, try to compete with Trulieve. And ultimately, as we saw that, when Jungle Boys showed up and put hand trim flower that are proper genetics, hype genetics out of California with good cultivation, indoor cultivation, they sold out. They set the single highest record for 1 week sales out of one store. 40 ounces out of one store. Best Trulieve's ever done on a per store basis was like 450. Best we ever did was like 385. So that just proved to me as we were going through the middle of this capital raise, all right, we're onto something, because they put proper flower on the shelves, hand trimmed, and they couldn't keep it in stock. And their store was not in Miami Beach. Their store was not in Orlando or Tampa or Fort Lauderdale. It was in Ocala. There's more horses than people in Ocala. That meant people were driving across the state to get there because there was finally good product on the market. And it was very validating. So we looked at it and went, okay, there's always a market in Florida. The whole street talks about California. When you talk to cannabis, they talk about Colorado. Florida's had its own cannabis culture. It was been the epicenter of most of the kind of narcotics culture in 70s and 80s. If it came into the U.S., there's a solid chance it came through Florida. And there's a bunch of really good growers here in Florida. There's a really strong culture here in Florida. So for us, it was, let's do something by Florida, in Florida, for Florida, take this unique brand that we've built and then pair it with high quality again. Let's go compete with Jungle Boys, because at the end of the day, Jungle Boys has one store right now. They're opening one tomorrow. Maybe they get one or two open by the end of the week. We start this game with 14 stores out of the gate, and they're not in Ocala. They're prime locations. So for us, it was seeing the opportunity that our lane opened back up and being able to dive back in headlong and go after that same market share that we've already proven we're really good at.
Yeah. I think what's interesting is that we're talking about a few things here. Like you just mentioned the different tiers of products and tiers of retailing experience. Jungle Boys is trying to enter in at that premium tier with the higher quality flower, drawing from the California genetics story. But then there's also this other aspect to cannabis. It's growing the good cannabis, but then there's also the consumer packaged good component of it. And can you speak a little bit? Because to me, that's like taking it to the next step. And one of the reasons why this is so important to me is that even in California, where you do have truly exceptional cannabis being grown, and we've talked about it before, that like Cannabiotics tends to hold one of the top 2 positions in the market for their flower in a jar. It is a hard position to defend. So what comes next, of course, is that the creation of a packaged good that has a whole other branded experience around it. So I'm curious to hear how you're thinking about taking it to that level with Sunburn.
Yeah, it's what I don't think has really happened yet. It's a huge blue sky opportunity. And you and I have talked about it extensively. I think we've talked about it on those podcasts before. It's, everyone, it was a race, and you were in those early days, Emily. So you and I were a couple of the people that were in those early days where it was get a license, issue a press release, raise 100 million, and figure out the cultivation and operations and branding side later. There wasn't a lot of thought put into how are we going to do this at scale? What are we planning for in 2, 3, 4, 5 years from a brand creation standpoint? Are we willing to go the route of a Tito's Vodka, who we've studied extensively on, just do it really good in Texas for 20 years? They're a 20-year overnight success story. It took a second, but now you walk into a bar, you ask for a Tito's and soda without even thinking about it. You don't even have to say vodka. So it's having that kind of a moment. Nobody's done that in cannabis. I think the closest we could say that's happened is probably cookies. But where cookies, in my humble opinion, missed the step is they got too big too fast, and they did licensing deals instead of doing it on their own. And they can't control quality when you do a license deal, because the consumer knows, the street knows. They're always going to know. Everyone knew Cookies Melrose. You went and bought flower at Cookies Melrose. It was Grand Flora and Surge Cannabis, and it was fire. And all of a sudden you try to do that in New Jersey or Michigan, and it's not the same. And from a CPG standpoint, that level of quality, if you're going to be premium, if you walk into a Louis Vuitton store in Milan, Italy, or San Francisco, California, or Miami, Florida, you're getting the same quality product over and over and over again. That's because you have to be disciplined. So what we're excited to do with Sunburn is focus on going deep, not wide, into one state, curating a brand that lives at the intersection of authenticity, high quality, and fun, and ultimately taking our time. It's often what you say no to that defines who you are more than what you say yes to. So for us, it's about doing it the right way, being disciplined. We're not going to be the biggest. We're not going to take the most market share out of the gate, but we're going to build an authentic Florida story that's paired with really high quality flower, which I know Danny and I have debated back and forth a lot on. Okay, we got to make sure that we raise enough capital that we can do this the right way and not have to cut corners, because I don't think you see that a lot in this market yet. I think the best MSO at doing this, in my humble opinion, is Ben Cobbler and what he's done at GTI. He has done, of the MSOs, he's done a great job on trying to stay disciplined. His Dog Walker brand is a brand that I think has a bright future. It's more kind of cannabis culture centric. You look at some of the other MSOs, they're just popping press releases off and kind of throwing darts blindfolded, hoping that they can appeal to consumers. So to me, you got to be disciplined if you truly want to go that CPG route, which is what we're really excited about.
I would just add to that. Brady just mentioned Green Thumb. I think Ben is certainly one of the A players that's out there. Charlie Bechtel at Cresco. The problem with these guys is that, not with them, with the companies, is because they're multi-state, they're unable to really get the economies of scale that they need. And what's so exciting to me about this, Florida in itself is its own country, but this state has so much opportunity in it. Brady just mentioned. And what's interesting is Brady and his team and our entire team moving the brand from east to west is something you don't hear a lot about. But when it's this authentic, and the stories Brady just mentioned about his father, it will resonate. And to Brady's point, these guys know how to grow, right? And they know how to sell, and they know how to basically meet the consumer demand that is craving quality. He just mentioned all the things. I'm just kind of going back over it again. But to me, that's why this story is really, really unique. And unfortunately, the laws in the land still don't allow for these economies of scale to occur. So this is not something where, yes, we may go into other states eventually, but just getting Florida right? I think Emily wants us to do that. So we're certainly going to focus on that. I just wanted to add that part. So
no, hey, and by the way, what I think everyone overlooks about Florida, and I'm not saying just because I'm here, look at the demographics of Florida. Sai, you and I have talked about this extensively. It's from a market standpoint. Yes, we're a medical market right now, but if you look at our little medical market at 700 and something thousand patients right now, plus or minus, compared on an aggregate sales basis, compared to other markets that are full adult use, Florida punches way above its weight. And I think the secondary thing I would say is if and when it's not an if, it's more of a when Florida goes adult use, it will be the number one market in the United States, hands down, bar none. for two reasons. A, 21 million people, only 21 licenses. Let's even assume they issue another 20. You're at 41 licenses. You compare that same population density to some other states, and it's still less than a third of what the other states' license caps are. Second piece of it is 118 million visitors last year over the age of 21 who would qualify to purchase cannabis. That's a huge number. And you pair that with, that's why we're so excited, you pair that with our store locations, which are primarily where visitors are in high throughput Main Street locations. They're not having to get in a cab to drive out to some distant dispensary in Vegas, because I studied Vegas's cannabis market a lot. The reason that Planet 13 and the Reef are so successful, it's not because they had better product, it's because it was a quick walk from the strip. You didn't have to get in a cab to go somewhere, which is what made the MedMen store so attractive to us, because MedMen was smart enough to take their adult use experience and go, we're going to put them where people are. We're going to put them where people want to go. We're going to overbuild the vaults, and we're going to make sure the parking lots are huge. So when Florida flips, it will be the biggest market in the country, and that is something that we are gearing up for in a big way, because I believe it's coming inside the next 2 to 4 years.
Yeah, I do want to talk about the population there and then the percentage of medical patients. I mean, you were mentioning before when you're in it is 400,000, and now we're double that basically. I think it's like 750,000 or so since you were last there, which is like 3 to 4% of the population. Do you expect that to keep growing significantly? Obviously, adult use is going to be a huge component when that does happen, but just kind of the patient count growth that you've seen so far. Is there anything that's like going to slow that down, or do we just expect that to keep rising based on what you've seen historically here?
I think it'll continue to grow. I think more and more people are getting familiar with the space. I think nationally, you look at what's happening nationally and the amount of press that cannabis is getting on almost a daily basis, it's continuing to increase. It's a drip, drip, drip. I think you'll see our director of our department here in Florida, the Office of Medical Marijuana Use, Chris Ferguson's a friend, and I've connected with him a bunch over the last couple of weeks, and he's geared the department up to be very quick. It's a little known fact, but we have a store location in Key West right across the street from Sloppy Joe's, about a block from Mallory Square. There's a Miracle Leaf clinic right next door. Miracle Leaf is one of the groups that's authorized to issue medical cards to qualified patients in Florida. And one of the things that we learned when we went down there and talked to the folks at Miracle Leaf is Florida residents get off the cruise ship, they pop in there on their walk down Duval Street in the morning, fill out their application, and Chris Ferguson and AMU now have it down to a same-day approval. So by that afternoon, they can go shopping. So what we used to be viewed in Florida was a 5 to 20, originally it was 30 days to get your card, then it went to like 20. Now it's same day. You apply in the morning, it gets approved, and you can use your driver's license. You don't even need a medical card. It links to your Florida driver's license to be able to go purchase. So I think you're going to see that number continue to tick up. We are going long as we did last time. I brought on a former very successful ER doctor who goes and works directly with the physicians. And then a lot of what we do is a little bit different than what you see from others in the market. We go to events that are non-traditional events, concerts, sandbars, surf contests, skate contests, fishing tournaments, sporting events. And we go there for two reasons. Number one, just to be there because, again, we want to be at the intersection of fun and authenticity. But secondarily, we go there to educate people on the market with iPads and being able to say, well, you don't have a card? Go into this database. You can pick a physician that you want to go see and talk to them about your condition and see if you qualify. Every bit of that you do is, again, a drip, drip, drip. And I'm not just saying we do it. Curaleaf does a great job of it. TrueLeaf does a good job of it. The active players that have significant share in the state, I think you're going to continue to see that number tick up as you see it get more talked about. And more importantly, if you look at what the cannabis stocks are doing on a macro markets level, I'd love to hear Danny and Emily's opinion on this. As the macro took a crap last week, the cannabis stocks were green and kind of held firm, which again solidifies that kind of vice industry standing. When everything goes to hell in a handbasket, the vice industries do okay. So I'd love to hear your comments, but I think the more that happens, the more eyeballs go onto cannabis.
I mean, I'll just say I think that is a really smart brand building decision because as we've been talking about, cannabis doesn't live in a silo. There's a Venn diagram where many activities activities overlap with cannabis. And it's funny, when I used to, before, when I had more time on my hands, I used to teach yoga. And I remember a lot of the surfers would come in with a lot of pain in their bodies and a lot of tightness. And cannabis was one of the things that they found to be the most useful on a recovery standpoint. And I'm also on the board of Athletes for Care. It's the same thing. And then there's just the more lifestyle aspect of where cannabis can sit in relation to music and physical activity, especially outdoor physical activity. So I think all of that is very wise.
Yeah, we had Rick Farman from Outside Lands on talking about that, intersection. And it's so rare, right, for a cannabis company to be able to get in front of a consumer, outside of a cannabis event. So I think that kind of strategy of looking at broader events type presence is pretty smart. So, Florida, there's so many unique things about Florida. And Danny said it's kind of like its own country down there. One of the things is like vertical integration. It's very specific in that market. And you see other markets with like kind of a blend of vertical integration. Does that give you room to really kind of experiment, create these kind of CPG type brands, retail those CPG brands before some sort of wholesale market maybe emerges? Is a wholesale market even in the cards ever for somewhere like Florida?
What's always attracted me and also our chief commercial officer, Ryan Martin, who comes with 25 years of alcohol industry experience on brand building. A lot of people view vertical negatively. We view vertical from a positive standpoint, in the sense that you basically have a government barrier to build your own brand. Yes, you can do license deals if you want to and bring outside brands in. I personally think that you're just giving up margin for no reason if you know what you're doing from an operational side, because the state's giving you the ability to do what Steve Jobs did in a crowded retail market when he launched Apple. He created the Apple Store, where you went to the Apple Store and you got to be immersed in the brand. You went to an Apple Store, it was all things Apple, formed an allegiance with it. What we get to do in a vertical market is have the consumer come in and experience all things Sunburn. They come to the store, they feel that the stores are going to be unique. Then they get to go and buy the products, buy the swag, and be a part of it. And without having to be in a California style dispensary where I have 50 flower brands, 20 vape brands, 20 edible brands, etc. From a brand building standpoint, the impression that you get to create and curate is far different than what you'd have to do in a horizontal market. So I do think we'll see a wholesale market at somewhere here in Florida, B2B. I think if it happens based on the legislative discussions I've had, it would be something similar to like in Illinois, where there's a threshold where you have to grow 60 or 70% of your own. You could pull from other people for 25 to 30%. The vertical market we very much view as a huge value add to be able to brand build, if you can do it.
I was just going to say, having a brand here kind of protects you, obviously, from that type of market occurring. And what's interesting is if you watch every state's iteration, whether it's Illinois, Massachusetts is one really that comes to mind, because that was an exciting state, obviously. And then when it went wholesale, depends the game of musical chairs where you were sitting. At that moment, you want great retail locations. Well, Sunburn has great retail locations. We're going to have enough grow over a period of time to obviously meet that demand. But then more importantly, I think the brand is really what protects the entity overall, because the brand can go anywhere over time. So unless you have a brand to really defend against what wall might come down, I think we can succeed in any of those type of scenarios. So I just wanted to add that part as well. So
great point.
So I do want to talk about data real quick. One of the things that I was looking at in the headset analytics was knowing that the patient count went up from January from 670 to 750. It's about 11% patient growth, but we saw baskets up by 20%. So that means the transactions are outpacing the growth of patients. So that could be a lot of things. People just wanting to buy more, coming back more frequently, maybe more access as stores are opening up. But that's, I think, a good metric to see. The average basket, the dollar size of the basket's actually going down a little bit, about 10% since the start of the year. So I think that, this is pretty common. We see it in a lot of earnings where, price pressure, this discounting challenge, and discounting is a big piece of that. In Florida, we see discounting around 30% versus a market like California, maybe like closer to 10, 12%. I mean, obviously, brand positioning is a big kind of to that point, right? Is a defensibility against things like discounting, right? If you have a premium brand, it tends to hold its price a lot better than maybe like a value brand. So is that part of the strategy? Are you looking at pricing? Are you going to be, obviously, I'm sure you'll be priced competitively, but, as you look to position yourself with some of these like premium genetics and premium products, is that going to factor into how it's priced as well?
Yeah, for sure. And I think you look at a lot of the Florida data. So the top three in the state between Trulieve, Curaleaf, Verano, I think right around on any given week, they're at a 70 to a 72 share of the market I'm just looking at flower. Curaleaf engaged in a massive discount war with Trulieve to go steal share. I mean, I think they picked up close to 8 or 9 points of share over 3 quarters. And that was because they went, Trulieve was priced at $22 for their cheapest eight, or $23 for their cheapest eighth, and Curaleaf came in at 18. Then Trulieve went to 20, they went to 16. So they got into a war which kind of dragged a lot of the metrics for the market down, because so much of the volume between those two companies, it's over 50, 55, 60% of the volume in the state. What I think Jungle Boys proved and provided me reassurance with is they went out and launched. They had $45 Ace when they started. It's inched up since then with no discounts. And they moved a tremendous amount of volume when they had it in stock. Because the street price, if you were to go purchase in the black market in Florida, is still somewhere between $45 and $55. And it's hand trimmed. It's good quality. It's what you'd expect to buy at a proper California dispensary on the top shelf side of things. So there is pricing pressure, but it's primarily felt in the lower tier products because there's a bit of a war going on down there. The good news is if you're a good vertical operator, because you're controlling it from start to finish, it's kind of the hard thing of getting the plane in the air. Once you're in the air and start to get to scale, you bring your COGS down. And because you're not buying anything wholesale, you have the ability to enjoy that margin all the way through from your start to finish. It's hard to get it going on the front end. Once you get it going, it's awesome. But I think in Florida, you're seeing the premium products still moving. Average state pricing, and we pull this on a daily basis, the average state pricing across the board is right around $40 for an eighth, which is good. Jungle Boys is just, they've shown pretty clearly that you price it right, it's good product, that you don't have to use discounts. Discounts to me always infer something's wrong with it. A product, I don't care, any category. You don't walk into, again, I study luxury CPG. You don't walk into Gucci, and I've unfortunately gone there with my wife too much. Nothing's on discount. Ever. Never, ever, 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 ever. Because you're buying into something and you're making an emotional decision. So, our model that we're trying to build is Whole Foods is something that a company that we studied quite a bit. In Florida, Publix has a 70 share of the grocery market. Huge. They dominate. But consumers will drive by 2 Publixes and 1 Winn-Dixie just to get to Whole Foods to spend 20 to 25% more because they had making an emotional decision to buy in. That's what our goal is. That's what we have to go do. But I think if you look at it's all driven by quality. The price compression that you've seen in Florida, I think almost anywhere. I mean, the price compression in California is driven by the fact that they have unlimited cultivation in only 700 retail stores. They got an oversupply. In Florida, we've got Sai, you probably got the number offhand. We've got to be close to 400 stores in Florida total. Compare that with California, full adult use California, 700 stores. Florida's got 400, only 700,000 patients. You can get into it pretty quick. And, Boris went to war with Kim. It cost him a lot of price and it drug a lot of the market metrics down. But if you put a premium hand trim product on the market or premium rosin with a proper brand, you can still command a price. And Jungle Boys just proved that.
Yeah, I think if you just if you study up on broader retail practices too, I think it proves to be a slippery slope to have these discounted practices, because then the consumer gets addicted to seeking the discount as much as they do to buying the product. And they also they'll wait because they've been conditioned to know that it's going to go on sale. And so it has also shown that the least sticky consumer is the one who's hunting for the best price. That's not a person who's bought in or engaged in a brand or an experience. They're a person who's really driven by one metric and one metric only, which is price.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because we had, in Publix, and Ryan used to always call it the Publix effect. And I used to ask him when he first started working with us, what are you talking about? And he'd say, well, in CPG world, Florida, every CPG executive knows that in Florida, you got to deal with the Publix effect. They've got a 70 share of the grocery store market, and they run a BOGO or a buy one, get one every single day on a different product. So the Florida consumers used to, I'm walking down aisle 7 today. What's up? What am I buying? Am I buying Clorox wipes or am I buying Lysol wipes? Depending on which one's on BOGO, you buy it. That's when we built out our pricing structure in Florida. We had to account for the fact that the Florida consumer has been conditioned to think that way. So instead of giving them just a flat discount, we said, okay, give us $200 or more in an order and we'll give you 15% off. Give us $300 or more in an order and we'll give you 20% off. Give us $400 more and we'll give you 25% off. And that way we're getting the volume we need. And because we're vertical, we're still backing into a $200 and something ounce. But ultimately we have the ability to get volume, and we're rewarding them from buying more instead of just discounting, which implies something's wrong with the product. But you got to understand the marketplace, which I think you see a lot of the companies that come into Florida, they're running a playbook from Chicago, or they're running a playbook from California, or they're running a playbook from New York. They're not understanding that there is this consumer in Florida that goes to Publix. I mean, I have friends that move from Florida to LA, and I go out and visit them. They're like, all right, we got to run by Publix real quick. I'm like, no, you live in LA. It's not Publix. We're going to Safeway. It's a thing here. So that's another thing where kind of being hyper local and regionally focused is critically important.
Absolutely. So just a couple quick questions on what you're seeing next on policy for Florida. I mean, so DeSantis came out with a couple of statements yesterday about the industry. And it's interesting, as someone who already has licenses, it has different implications to someone might wanting to expand into the market. And then there's other things he said. So I'm curious to hear that. And then, I try to shy away from the crystal ball question, but just kind of if you have a thought on the trajectory and timeline around adult use.
Yeah, so, the governor he's no longer just a Florida governor. I've known Governor DeSantis since he was one of the few Republicans that was friendly on cannabis when I used to go around that U.S. House back in 2015 and 2016 talking about cannabis reform. He's a veteran. He believed in cannabis. He's not a user himself or he's not going to hold a press conference with a joint in his pocket. But at the end of the day, he legalized flower here in Florida, which within about 2 months of being in office. So I give him credit for that. And he's modernized the department. He's funded. He brought Chris Ferguson in to help modernize the department and fund things. But at the end of the day, yeah, he's looking for tax revenue. I talked to him, pitched him quite some time ago on create a wholesale market, B2B, and tax the wholesale market. Can't tax sales in Florida because it's constitutionally exempt like medicine. They're looking for revenue. He's looking for sound bites. He's likely going to run for president. They've tried to look at raising the application cost or the renewal fees for the cannabis licenses previously. A couple different, Rick Scott wanted to do it. Governor Scott, who's now Senator Scott. It never happened. I think it's a lot of it's noise to a large extent. I wish it didn't happen, but it is what it is. I think if you look at the real size of the prize in Florida, it's the 2024 constitutional amendment. That's it, bar none. And I will say the most recent amendment that's out there that we're going to get behind is very narrowly tailored, over the age of 21, no public consumption, is serviced by the existing MMTCs. It doesn't contain a lot of the components that the previous amendments contained, which include the right to people to grow plants at their house and other stuff that got it opened up for collateral attack at the Supreme Court. So it ultimately got bounced. This amendment doesn't have that. And we're going heavy and hard in the paint to make sure this one gets on the ballot, because I'm pretty sure if it does, it's polling north of 80%, most they're on the recent polls I've seen. And it's a game changer. So Governor DeSantis has been supportive, irrespective of his comments, which are, regrettable to say the least. He's been supportive of the industry in a way that we didn't have with Rick Scott. Outside of that, Florida is poised. The constitutional amendment is the goal. We get that done. Put on your helmet. We're taking off. It'll be the number one market in the country really quick. And we'll look smart for once.
I'm excited about Florida because I've been traveling there about once a quarter for the last 2 years, and just seeing the flow of people to the Miami area, the flow of investors to that area. I mean, it's already been a vibrant investment community, but I think it's great to see that flowing and the activity going there. So I think it's going to be a great market as it was before, but also just with all the attention it's getting. I remember I met this art dealer from London, and she was like, I'm so excited we have an office here now because there's so much activity going on in Miami. And she was very happy to be traveling there. But so, you can't fall out of a basement window, or it's hard to, but the cannabis markets have been up a little bit. And we're pretty excited to see, some of this might be the change at the CSC around the short situation around the stocks. But Danny, I'm kind of curious going into the fall, I'm just excited to be kind of moving forward and moving past the Q2 earnings and into seeing what the rest of the year and what 2023 frankly has to offer. But I'm curious to hear your perspective, Danny, about what you think goes on in terms of the capital markets on the public side, but also how you think capital will be flowing on the private side around cannabis investing.
Yeah, so if you were under a rock and the first time you ever looked at the sector was about 6 weeks ago, you're up 25, 30%. So congrats on that. So there are some people that are up. But it's been quite a ride. I think we're down, if you're just using the MSOS as a proxy, down 50% for the year, up 30% from the lows. But I think most importantly, and you guys pointed this out earlier, up over 10% for the month in a very volatile month. And something has happened, whether it's, the naked shorting now being banned or on the CSE or whatever, or whether the SAFE Act. So I think this sector is heavily owned by retail, as we know. And the U.S. names trade on the pink sheets, basically. So it's impossible for an institutional investor to own them. So in the swoon in this spring and early summer that happened in the overall markets, it took cannabis with it completely. And something has changed here. And what has changed here, I think, and Brady just mentioned it a minute ago, is, stuff going on in Washington. I do believe, and we talked to a lot of people there, and I talked to people who are normally very conservative on, are we going to get a SAFE Act or some form of a bank act? The answer seems to be yes, and I think the stocks are starting to tell you that. So you have two mergers, right, which are set to close. You got Cresco Columbia Care, Verano Goodness Health, previously Vireo. Those two are going to close here, hopefully, in the next month also. I think that's just good from a cleanup perspective. And as far as money flowing into the space, if you do get some type of safe banking act or something that just allows real institutions to come into the sector, you're going to see, as Brady mentioned before, these vices, gambling stocks we're seeing actually starting to outperform. Okay, what other industries, gambling and cannabis, are going to produce any tax revenue for local municipalities? I don't have to go into the markets here and tell everybody what's happening on a macro perspective in the States, but I believe that. And from the private side, there's a lot of money still on the sidelines in private equity in general. Yes, they're marking their books down, yes, but there's a lot of cash to put to work. And believe me, they're looking for an excuse to come into anything. So again, you start to see some of the GPs from these funds investing personally. It's a matter of time before they come in, themselves. And there's going to be, if you have these orphan stocks right now in cannabis that are sitting in single digits that are 200 to 300 million, just imagine if you're actually able to tap the debt markets, the real debt markets for capital, you will have LBOs and companies going private quickly and reemerging years from now in the public markets. That's probably the most logical thing to do. And I feel like at Sunburn, where we've gone right now, we just are threading that needle. We're still going to be private. We were able to raise that private money, and we should benefit from all the capital market changes that are going to be occurring over the next, call it 3 to 5 years. So from a timing perspective, I think we're in great shape, but that's kind of my overall view on the markets in general. So hopefully we've hit the lows, hopefully, on the sector from here. So
love it. And no small feat to be able to put this thing together in today's climate and get this thing off the ground. So huge congratulations there. Really excited to see, how this all plays out over time and watch the numbers come through as Sunburn really hits the market here. So thanks so much for joining us today, Brady and Danny. Awesome conversation as always, and looking forward to having you back again sometime soon.
Pleasure. Thank you, guys.
It's 4:20 here on the East Coast on the nose. So
there it is, on the nose.
Thanks for listening to the High Rise Podcast, presented by Headset. For more information on Headset, visit headset.io.